Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. I'm just sitting here drinking my morning coffee. About to cook my breakfast, get ready to squat and all that. And I thought I would answer a question. Here's a question a subscriber asked. And I think it's an interesting question. He asked about what do I think about long-term progression in a gym, like a commercial gym, or even a hardcore gym versus a home gym. And do I think lack of access to certain equipment will affect progress? Okay, interesting question. I've covered kind of this before, a more detailed, longer version of this, covering all the different aspects, the financial, the travel time, everything else. But in this case, we should probably focus purely upon motivation, how that affects progression, and maybe access to equipment, because there's pros and cons to both, even though I'm a big believer in minimalist training. And we should probably, I maybe should do another video explaining what minimalist training is. As a lot of people seem to get confused on that. They seem to think that minimalist training means more work, when I'm sitting here going, well, if you do 30 sets of squats and 10 sets of deadlifts every week, that's minimalist training. Because you're only doing 2 exercises for your legs. That's minimalist training. So, it's low exercise selection. So that being said, what we need to look at is motivation. How is it going to affect your motivation? That's going to depend upon the type of person you are. Now, I am in a slightly different situation than other people with a home gym because I'm a YouTuber and I have thousands of people who watch my training every single day. All right. So one part of that motivation is going to be different for me that might be different for you. Even though I love home gyms, I love home gyms. And for me, it has to do with just the ability to get to my equipment on my own schedule easier, not have to wait on equipment, not worry about stuff being busted, broke. And if I need something bad enough, I guess I'll buy it and find a way to make space for it. So that's kind of one of the big reasons for me. But I actually enjoy the social environment of gyms. Not when it's crowded and it's bro night and everyone's in there, when it's wall to wall at 8 or 9 p.m. in a big box gym. No, I don't enjoy that. But as far as just, if there's 10, 15 people in a weight room, I tend to enjoy that environment. I actually tend to be social at the gym. And I can be a bit of an exhibitionist at times. So here's what that comes down to. As far as your motivation and how social you enjoy being around other people who train is going to be a big factor. And then we'll get to motivation also. But a big part of that has to do with, do you enjoy the social environment of the gym? But can that be a good or a bad thing? I'll be honest, I've got messed up on training before because I take the time and I'm chatting with someone and having an interesting conversation. It could be about training, it could be about something else, and end up taking longer than I want to get my workout done. So it can be a negative even if you enjoy the environment. So part of that comes down to is, does the social environment of the gym help or hinder your gains? Like, how social do you enjoy being? So that's a factor to consider as far as your motivation goes and even your time management goes, because a lot of people don't have unlimited training time. So that's a big factor that you would need to weigh out as far as your progress goes. Number 2, your motivation itself. Do you enjoy being seen training? Do you take motivation from other people watching you? As some people don't like being watched, and other people enjoy showing off to some extent. I enjoy, if I'm doing a heavy lift and I'm going to hit a PR or something even relatively heavy or a bunch of heavy work sets, I'm totally cool with other people watching. Always have been. It's like, yeah, okay, I'll put on a little bit of a show for them. It's all good. But not everybody does that. Not everyone enjoys that. Some people don't enjoy that. And for some people, it will motivate you more to be more consistent. Or you need a training partner or people to work out with or work out around or spotters or whatever, because it motivates you in a certain way and it affects you as far as external motivation versus internal motivation. Or are you a person who is training purely because you want the results and you don't need any sort of external motivation? You don't care if people see you, anything else. If you're that latter person, a home gym is probably going to be better for you for consistency and long-term training effort. But when people think about these things, you get a lot of people say, well, I don't understand the whole needing people to watch me. I actually am more comfortable with the other. Well, you need to understand there's varying scales of that. And a perfect example is something that researchers have noted over the years. You guys ever notice sometimes when you're driving in traffic, there are people who aren't there traveling to work. they're either jogging down the side of a really busy road during rush hour traffic with all the car fumes and everything, or they're riding their bike purely as exercise. Those are the sort of people who are on the most extreme end, and researchers have noted that these people don't exercise in that way for the health benefits, at least not subconsciously. They exercise that way because they need hundreds of other people to see them exercising. And that's why they'll actually go out of their way to go over to an area full of traffic in order to do it. So they're seen during rush hour. The reality is any health benefits they're getting from that cardio are being offset by the enormous amounts of car exhaust that they're breathing in while doing it. They're not actually helping their health realistically in any real way. Again, it's something that psychologists noted over the years, but those are people who need that external validation so much so that they're willing to suffer the health effects of doing that. Because if you think about it, yeah, there's no benefit to that. They're absolutely harming their health by being outside a vehicle, not sealed up, breathing deeply because they're doing cardio for an hour through intense car fumes and rush hour traffic right next to the road. They're not benefiting themselves in any way. So you have that to factor in, that internal versus external motivation, and people are on different sliding parts of the scale on that. That could affect your progress. The other thing we come to is access to equipment. That can be a good or a bad thing, because you guys know me. I don't believe that a lot of this fluff and pump people do is a good thing. And I think access to too much equipment is a bad thing. And it's not a bad thing because in the sense of having options, because a lot of people will say, all right, Jason, but it gives you options that you don't necessarily have to use. What's wrong with having more options? Well, the problem with having more options is that a lot of times people will, because they have the option to do so, whether it's conscious or not, whether they really believe they're actually helping themselves or not, they will shy away from the better exercises to go do some cable stuff or some machine stuff instead of getting under a heavy barbell. Instead of doing a more effective, bigger compound movement that's going to give them better overall results, they'll go focus on this other stuff. And I'm not talking about competitive bodybuilders peaking for something to where they have a single lagging head of their muscle that they need to bring up. I'm talking about people who actually go use the machines, who have work capacity left that they could be using, for something more efficient and more effective. Hey, what will that do in the long term? I think that leads to slightly less results in the long term. Right? I think it can cause that to happen. Now, the downside is that sometimes there are things that really have benefits that you have access to in a gym, depending upon your goals, that you may not always have access to at home, and that can be an issue, and it can even be an issue in some cases as far as injury prevention, muscle balance, everything else. Perfect example, most people with home gyms, getting access to the best hamstring development may not always be easy. And I know we can argue that in terms of hamstring size, we're talking about overall hamstring size, that's not true, because you have variations of deadlifts and pulls from the floor, Romanian deadlifts, everything else that can put an enormous amount of size on your hamstrings. You can get them as big as possible. The problem is that it doesn't work all aspects of the muscle completely, and it can leave certain elements of the hamstring weaker that could give you a slightly higher risk of injury, even a higher risk of injury when you're deadlifting and doing other stuff. So not having access to something that allows for your knee to bend, knee flexion is a form of hamstring stimulation, is a problem. So that could be done on hamstring machines or curls or cable machines or whatever, but a glute ham raise also solves that. Well, the problem you run into a lot of people's home gyms, very few people have a glute ham raise in their home gym. I don't even have one right now. Again, space, cost, everything else. A good glute ham raise will oftentimes run you $500 just for a device you use for one exercise. Takes up a fair amount of space. Or a lot of people, it's not a priority. That would resolve this issue, but it comes down to access to certain things like that could make a big difference, because most people could reach their maximum size and strength potential with nothing but Olympic barbell exercises. They could totally be done. Like you could literally build up your entire physique to maximum muscular development, and you can build maximum strength, everything else with just barbell exercises. It can be done. You're forced to be a little more creative in your home gym, but if you're an internally motivated person, you'll find a way to do that. It's just that occasionally you might find something that could be a problem, like maybe the biceps femoris might have an issue there. One little head there could become an issue on a muscle like that needs a certain movement to at least to develop the strength in that part of the muscle that could help with injury prevention. Better knee stabilization, things like that in the long term. So we can run into minor problems like that. But I think, again, it comes down to, are you internally motivated enough to reach your goals that you're going to take what you have and find a way to use it maximally? Can be done in a home gym, but people who sometimes aren't as motivated towards their goals like that, they don't have access to as much. Maybe they've come from a gym environment and they think that they need all this other stuff. It can hurt their motivation. So that's what it comes down to. But I think even for me, the one biggest thing I think could limit me in the long term is maybe not having access to a glute ham raise right now. Things like that, little minor things. So that's one thing, for example, we should have access to. The other thing is access to enough GPP equipment when you're at a home gym to really develop your maximum athleticism. Again, things like sleds, prowlers, farmers walks, handles, a lot of that stuff, a lot of us don't have in our home gym setups. And it's oftentimes not just a money constraint, it's a space constraint. Do we even have a place where we live right now to currently use those things, or to use them conveniently? Do we have easy access? Because that's one of the big perks of the home gym, is easy access to all your stuff. Not having to travel to a gym, but do you have access to everything that you need? And it's a balancing act. And I think these things can affect long-term progress in both directions. I think too much variety available to you can cause, again, a lot of fuck-around-itis. It can be a problem. But by that same token, sometimes you might find there are some things that you really kind of need to maximize your potential, or something with injury risk that you might not be able to squeeze into your home gym. So this can kind of be a double-edged sword as far as that goes. Access to too much versus not enough. And again, it's a balancing act, doing what you can with what you've got. So ultimately what it comes down to is, does it help or hurt your progress to do one versus the other? It depends on the type of person you are, how you're motivated in terms of a social environment, and how creative you're willing to be with the equipment you have access to. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.